Story 1. I worked briefly with a psychologist whose clients were sex offenders. Their therapy was mandatory. Most almost seemed like normal guys but a little off. However, one would give me chills just entering the room. I could feel him before I could see him. He made me very uncomfortable. There was the lobby and the reception area where I sat. My area was behind a security door that had to be buzzed open. There was a partition with a few slots for paperwork, but clients could not access me unless I buzzed them in. This man would sit across the lobby, in the chair farthest from my area, and just stare at me, rubbing his palms on his knees. He never said more than a few words to me. After a few months, I told my supervisor that I could not stand it anymore. I started feeling really paranoid and afraid of walking to my car or being followed. When I said this, my supervisor became very serious and asked if I had seen the client outside of the office anywhere at all, even briefly. It turned out that client had been stalking and raping women since the 1980s, and I was his target type. Story 2. Maternal grandfather framed his own daughter so she would go to jail instead of him for tax fraud. She was 25 years old, trusting her father, and he tricked her into signing paperwork she did not understand. He ignored her crying to save himself. He is a psychopathic individual. Story 3. My ex-sister-in-law was extremely manipulative and abused her own son. I hate to admit it, but when she died in July due to an exploding propane tank, I was actually happy. There is so much I could say about Lisa, and none of it is good. Story 4. My uncle is my father's brother. I am adopted, and during my childhood, my mother tried shielding me from him by keeping me away. She was kind enough not to speak ill of him. She told me he loved us but was just a closed-off person. Growing up, I learned how twisted he was. After my grandmother died, he tried taking over my father's share of the inheritance. He worked overtime to get my father to divorce my mother, and once she passed away, he and his wife tried to force my father to change his will to benefit themselves. When my father became ill and I had to hospitalize him, he made a false complaint against me, accusing me of abusing my elderly, helpless father by starving him. All because I was not blood-related and a person of color. I was very close to spending years in prison for pure pettiness. To top it off, he spread a rumor during my father's funeral that I had abducted him and was keeping us apart. That is who he is. Story 5. My biological grandmother sexually abused me for about 10 years. It is disturbing how much she enjoyed it, and she absolutely loved doing it in public settings or for photographs. Story 6. The wife of my old boss. She would come to work late, angry and drunk, parking her Mercedes across 2 spaces and demanding everyone drop everything to help her fix some trivial issue. If anyone had anything more pressing, she would fly off the handle, screaming about how it was her company. Then my boss died, and she was left in charge. She buried her head in the sand and would scream and cry about how she was going to kill herself whenever anyone asked her to do anything important, like sign bank paperwork or bring someone in to help. She did not let any of his family attend the funeral and went into detail in the eulogy about how they got together through an affair and how people getting hurt was necessary. When someone at the company who had been by the boss's side since the beginning was diagnosed with lung cancer, she said, "I wish he'd hurry up and die so I don't have to give him any more sick pay." Then the business went under and we were all made redundant via email. I have no idea what happened to her. She lived alone with no contact with anyone, burning every single bridge she had, even with her neighbors. I do not believe in karma in the spiritual sense, but I definitely feel like she is living her punishment for being so vile. Story 7. A friend of a friend seemed really strange the few times I talked to him. There was absolutely no emotion on his face or in his voice. One night, he unsettled me enough that I left my friend's house. He beat my friend nearly to death and decapitated another man that night with a claw hammer. He spent his entire trial laughing at the evidence and the families in court. Story 8. My sister has stolen hundreds, if not thousands, of pain pills from my grandmother and my mom, hundreds of dollars from everyone she knows, and several items from numerous stores like Walmart and Dollar General. She is a habitual lying sociopath who cares about no one but herself. If she were thirsty, she would sell both her kids for a drink. I could say more, but I am tired, and trying to remember every single bad thing she did would take me at least an hour, if not longer. I try to see the good in people. When I hear of people murdering, stealing, and everything else, I try to see it from their point of view. I genuinely wish that we could all do and be better people. If she dropped dead right now, I would absolutely not shed a single tear. I would not be happy she was gone, but at the same time, the world would be a better place if she were not in it. Story 9, My half-brother. I have 3 siblings who are all half-siblings, but I just call the others my brother and sister. I try to distance myself from him as much as possible. He is almost completely disowned from the family because my sister and I have made it clear we will not attend anything he is at. He is a racist, misogynistic drug addict who steals, abuses his wife and children, assaults people, and is generally a terrible person. He once stole a car with a child inside. He lived with his aunt to help her since she was bedridden, but he was stealing money from her and neglecting her. He has used methamphetamine, heroin, and cocaine, and was so addicted to alcohol that he has injected it before. My mother keeps giving him second chances and money, and it is very frustrating. Story 10. I worked at a behavioral health facility for juveniles. I worked on a unit specifically for kids who had some type of sexual issue or offense. We had a 12-year-old who was a sexual predator, made worse by the fact that he was open about it. He said he planned to engage in sexual activity with one of the 16 and older kids on the unit. His reasoning was that they could face legal charges while nothing would happen to him due to the age difference. Story 11. I hired a day laborer a few times for painting. People say old painters are crazy from the fumes, so I attributed his somewhat erratic behavior to that. I was driving him home one day, and he told me about 2 acquaintances of his who raped a woman. Although I told him I didn't want to know, he felt the urge to explain what they did and where it happened. Halfway through his story, he switched from third person to second person, replacing they with we. I realized he had some strange need to confess to something really evil. I dropped him off and never saw him again. Story 12. Criminal defense lawyer here. I have only met one truly evil person out of thousands of what society would consider incredibly dangerous individuals. 95% of my clients are behind bars. He is the only client I refuse to be in a room alone with. When I first met him, it was behind glass at a correctional center for an interview. I was very grateful for that glass. He was cold, calculating, manipulative, and charming. I will never forget his dead, yet somehow playful eyes. I was a mouse to him. To be fair, he viewed everyone as his plaything, and as his lawyer, I was no exception. I think 99.9% of all my clients could be rehabilitated and released to live safely in the community. Not him. Story 13, yes. Ms. Makos, a teacher at St. Cyril Elementary School in Pittsburgh in the 1980s and 1990s, was a truly evil person. When I was in her class, she behaved super sweetly to a poor boy who had just had to repeat 3rd grade and was understandably awkward when joining us. She would send him out of the classroom to run errands for her as though it were a special privilege. Whenever he left the room, she would read his assignments aloud to the class and make jokes about his mistakes. Then, when she heard footsteps, she would remind us all that what happens in the classroom stays in the classroom. Of course, I reported her to both my parents and school administration. The result was no consequences for her, but I started getting sent out on errands, or in my case, not actually going and instead staying within earshot to eavesdrop. When I was gone, she would remind everyone that I took what was in the classroom to others and could not be trusted, and that no one should ever trust me. A few years later, my mother was student teaching at St. Cyril and walked past Ms. Makos' door to hear her telling the class not to trust another student for betraying them by telling their parents what happened in class. Just an awful, evil woman. Story 14. I managed a Staples copy center. We had a general manager who lied their way into the position, and it showed. Eventually, the regional manager decided to replace her and moved one of his other general managers from another store to ours. My store was one of the highest profit stores in the company because our commercial rent was locked close to the original rent when the building was constructed. We needed to be open for only 2 days to cover the bills for the entire month. The new manager wanted a fresh start and more profit, So he launched an internal investigation claiming widespread employee theft. He had friends in loss prevention investigate everyone in the store. Everyone except the two assistant managers was fired and blacklisted from ever being employed by Staples again. I later found out that the manager was a former police officer who had been fired for unethical conduct. I learned this from one of his former officers who was a member at my mixed martial arts gym. He warned me to stay away from him and said I could not trust anything he said or did. I made it my personal campaign to get him removed from the company. He was eventually removed, but I am still blacklisted. Story 15. Yes, that person was my father. Without writing a novel, he was physically abusive towards me, and sexually, physically, and emotionally abusive towards my mother and sisters. One of my sisters is also my niece as a result of his grotesque beliefs about women and his obsession to have a son. There are arguments that could be made that there are worse people in the world, but in my mind, there is nothing worse than what my father was, a monster. I can't believe that of all the posts I have made over the years, this is the one that gains the most attention. It is strange to me that my trauma is somehow entertainment for others. But I wanted to answer the question honestly, just to answer a few questions quickly and clearly so I do not have to repeat myself too many times. Both my parents have passed away along with 6 of my 9 sisters. My sister/niece is one of those who have passed away. My extended family treats me very well, and I have a very close relationship with them. However, my remaining 3 sisters, who still live in the United States, refuse to speak to me. My family disowned me when I was 14 because I was gay. I am now 37, so honestly, no time lost. I do not think I have ever had a post that received 500 upvotes before. I am a little unsure how to respond correctly. Story 16. Not as bad as many of these, but it is a subtle evil that destroyed the next generation. A step-aunt was staying with us with her 2 children, twins. They were woefully behind in all forms of math and reading, so as a 15-year-old I took some time to work with them and help them read the first chapter of a real book. They both excitedly ran to their mother and read the first few pages to her. She grabbed the book from them and screamed, "Stop it! Reading is for smart people." They were about 12. Story 17. My grandfather never talked much about the Vietnam War, but he told my mother the story of a man he served with whom he believed was pure evil. He was worried the man would return to the United States and continue killing because he enjoyed it. One day, while walking outside a village, the man suddenly shot a girl in the face. The girl did not look at them or say anything. My grandfather said it happened out of nowhere. The man held a higher rank than my grandfather, and my grandfather was afraid of him, so he never spoke up. However, he regretted this for the rest of his life. He said he saw the girl's face whenever he closed his eyes to go to sleep every night. This memory stayed with him until he died in his mid-70s. Story 18. A guy I went on one date with gave me bad vibes the entire time. I've never felt like that on a date before, where you feel you have to do everything you can to protect yourself. Not make this guy mad, not give him any excuses to say you owe him anything, and not be alone with him. There was an undercurrent of anger running through him that you could feel, plus an overwhelming feeling that he was constantly lying about everything, and he was too handsy. I always made it a habit to carry enough money to cover dinner and never get into a car with someone on a first date. It was the right choice in this case. The check for dinner came when he was in the bathroom, so I quickly put my money down to cover myself and the tip. He came back, saw it, and looked furious. I declined a second date with him over text. A week later, he started harassing me in the middle of the night, masturbating on the phone. I couldn't block him since it was a restricted number, and I didn't want to turn off my phone because my grandmother had been very unwell. She passed away not long after this. If I ever see his name or picture in the headlines as a rapist or serial killer, I will not be surprised. Story 19. There was a kid who lived on my street. He was the youngest, about 9 years old. There was just something wrong with him. He had cold, dead eyes. Anything he was told not to do was like a challenge to him. Even things like, "It's good to be nice to people," were just ways for him to prove others wrong. I remember going to his house for his birthday. His sister came downstairs and started singing a song in front of us. He glared at her, got up, walked over, ripped the lyric sheet out of her hands, told her it was rubbish, and threw it in the bin. She went away in tears, and the parents comforted her. I said to him that was uncalled for. His reaction was to grab my throat and start trying to choke me. I laughed it off with his hands still around my throat. One of his parents came back and told him to stop and calm down. But he kept choking me, and it started to get tighter. I realized he was really trying to choke me. His face was strained, showing he was putting effort into it. His parent then yanked him off me and demanded he apologize to his sister. The party was over, and he and his parents soon moved away. A few years ago, a friend said to me, "Hey, remember that kid? He's in jail now for killing someone. He shot them." It turns out he became a drug dealer. Someone was dealing on his territory, and he just went up to them and shot them. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. I can't say I was surprised. I dread to think what else he got up to. Story 20. My mom abused my father while he was dying. When I confronted her about it, she just blinked and said, "Yes, I am abusing him, but he deserves it. I am well aware of my father's faults, but he was never abusive with her. He worked his entire life to support her, and when his health failed and he could not work anymore, she decided he was a liability. She also refused to work at that time, even though they were 3 years away from paying off the house and only needed someone earning minimum wage to make the house payment. We offered to help her get a good-paying part-time job. They ended up losing everything. He passed away and she died alone. Story 21. Pretended to like me so they could use me for a home while being extremely abusive for a year, and then robbed me of $4,000 on top of not paying rent or anything else. Story 22. Not without reason, but she is what most people she has crossed would consider evil. My sister has borderline personality disorder and likely narcissistic personality disorder. She is adopted and was diagnosed in adulthood. She suffered extreme, horrific child abuse in early childhood and was abandoned by her primary caregiver, which led to disorganized attachment. When I met her, we were both young and I had no idea what was going on. I saw someone socially skilled and manipulative, able to make many acquaintances within seconds of entering a room. People just loved her. She could say, "Watch this," and make boys fall in love with her almost instantly. I was a socially awkward kid and was in awe. However, I had to guide her through cognitive empathy often. It was like she could perform and say or do the right things for social approval, but did not truly understand that other people have feelings or that their feelings matter beyond her own impulses. Social relationships, even friendships and sex, were entirely transactional. She repeatedly slept with her close friends' husbands without remorse, cheated in every single relationship as soon as someone new appeared, became addicted to drugs, sabotaged her birth control to trap a man, had a baby and traumatized her child, cannot fathom accountability, and her life is a revolving door of acquaintances who look good on the surface but are rarely lasting friendships. She appears incapable of introspection. When confronted about her behavior, she shuts down or becomes aggressively dangerous. She is likely to remain this way for her lifetime. Story 23. My brother had every opportunity handed to him. He was violent from a young age. He hurt neighborhood kids, our little sister, pets, anything and anyone. He wanted to move out, so our parents gave him a single-wide trailer furnished with nice furniture from their house. He burned it down for fun. My dad said he saw the devil in him while he was dancing around and laughing at the fire he caused. When he needed a car, they got him one. When he needed a house, they gave him one of their rental properties. He got in trouble and our mom bailed him out. He was charged with assault, but our mom paid a lawyer a large sum to get an attempted murder charge reduced to assault. He served 18 months in prison. After his release, he got his house and car again. Within a year, he murdered a woman he was with. He strangled her with a cell phone charger, set her body on fire, and left her on the side of the road. She was only identifiable by a pin she wore on her shoulder. He was sentenced to life without parole. He continues to cause problems in prison. According to him, they cannot send him to prison again. Story 24. My father-in-law. I met him exactly once, but I know all of this to be true. Narcissistic, misogynistic, emotionally abusive, controlling. He literally put his children's food money into a crack pipe and smoked it away. Even without the drugs, he was pure evil. He impregnated his first wife when she was barely 17. He was in his 20s. They had my husband and his one full sibling. He got my biological mother-in-law addicted to methamphetamine for over 10 years, allowing him to gain full custody since his addiction was easier to hide. She has been clean for more than 6 years now, but not until after finding an even worse man to have more children with. She is doing fine now, and we are actually very proud of her. Then he met my other mother-in-law, who did most of the raising of my husband even though they met when he was about 7 or 8 years old and she was 17. That cruel man learned from his first marriage and kept her pregnant, exhausted, and away from his drug stash. My husband has 8 half-siblings, and all 5 of them were born by the time my second mother-in-law was 25. One example of many. When she returned to school, he smashed her laptop because there were men on campus. My husband, who was still a little child, salvaged her hard drive and important school materials. Luckily, she managed to leave with the children, with my husband's help. It has been almost 15 years since all his children and both of his ex-wives abandoned him due to his drug addiction and ego. He still believes he is owed his family, and occasionally calls my second mother-in-law to complain, asking, "Why did everyone leave me? I'm their father." He is a raging bigot, yet most of his children are openly proud of who they are in some way. Only the youngest, who is still a teenager, carries his surname. My husband is in the process of changing his surname to my family's name, and all these other sons are doing something similar. That name will die in the same crack house as that terrible man. My husband and his siblings will never even attend his funeral. My husband says the closest he will come is paying for copies of the death certificate so he can frame one. Story 25. A man I went to college with ended up being the world's biggest evil person. He would get people addicted to heroin, then steal their supply when they overdosed to feed his own habit. He went from friend group to friend group doing this. He used his charismatic ability to sell anything to others for his own personal gain. Story 26. My brother is 3 years younger than me. He was the golden child. My maternal grandmother genuinely thought he could do no wrong. My mother always made excuses for him. He was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, attention deficit disorder, and oppositional defiant disorder at 5 years old. The diagnosis came shortly after the first time he stabbed me. His behavior only escalated from there. My stepfather tried to discipline him several times. Once, my stepfather actually let me fight back and land a few punches on my brother. It never got better. He was court-ordered to spend 2 years in a boys' ranch during junior high school. He had stabbed a kid in the ear with a pen. His defense was, he told me I looked poor. Besides, I took out the ink so he wouldn't get sick. My mother defended him every step of the way. It was such a relief when he ran away at 18. Story 27. My paternal grandparents. If you can think of a way to abuse a child physically, emotionally, and sexually without leaving visible scars, I lived it. They were utter psychopaths. I was able to protect my younger sister for the most part, so there is that silver lining. Both are dead now, but I am no contact with most of that side of the extended family who enabled the abuse. Story 28. My college had a social app called YIKYAK. It was all about making anonymous posts for nearby people to see. There was one guy on the app who briefly lived in my building who was probably the saddest and most despicable person I have ever known. He would spend all day every day on the app posting and commenting the most hateful things in the world. You could always tell it was him because he wrote at a 5th grade level and had a few favorite words that I bet you could guess. He used some kind of emulator that allowed him to continuously make a new account every time he got banned, which was like every other day. There were multiple times he went to a location to fight someone who had wronged him, and I know for a fact he was kicked out of at least 2 different dorms on campus. He looked and smelled like the biggest country neckbeard you can imagine. He threatened to murder women and black men. He ranted about females at least twice a day, freaked out if anyone insulted him, and generally was just a horrible person. He clearly had some kind of narcissistic personality disorder because he genuinely could not see why he was in the wrong. He eventually disappeared from campus and the app after a while, and I am completely convinced it was because he was either arrested for planning some kind of attack or he died. There is no chance he would have left on his own. Tormenting people on there was his only pastime. Story 29. I was set on fire, had my crotch burned with a blowtorch, stabbed, had a part of me flayed, almost raped, and nearly had my intestines removed by the same person. He also used to beat me, kick me, frame me for false accusations, and he shot kittens with airsoft guns. He hoped one of his dogs would die in a fire. I was between 8 and 11 years old when I knew him. He was a year older than me. All the abuse happened when I was 8 to 11 years old. I heard he also leaked nude pictures of a girl who had a crush on him at school and sexually assaulted his cousin. Story 30. My cousin turned out to be a highway serial killer who preyed on girls that resembled his stepdaughter. Story 31. My ex. It sounds trite, and I am sure many divorced people make that claim, but it has been well over a decade, so I think I have some objectivity at this point. I strongly suspect that she is a psychopath. Essentially, that is my definition of evil. She presents as a caring individual, but she completely lacks empathy. During the time I was with her, 15 years, she never cried, not even once. That perhaps should have been a red flag. Story 32. I have one that is still haunting me. I was working in a call center and we had our fair share of unusual people, but this one man was off even for those lowered standards. He looked normal but never talked much and befriended no one at work. However, he was always on time and worked well. Managers were even considering him for promotion until another coworker filed a complaint. It turned out the man was her ex and the father of her child. She had a restraining order against him. He found out where she worked and quit his high-paying job to start on minimum wage at our company. Of course, he was fired on the spot. But it was too late. He had already discovered where she lived. A few weeks after he was fired, he lurked in the stairwell of her apartment complex. When she came home from work, he stabbed her multiple times in front of her 6-year-old daughter. Story 33. My ex. What made them truly evil to me was that they were extremely rude to children, cursing and screaming at kids. These children were no more than 10 years old, maybe younger. They were sitting on the same bench as us in a public seating area. The bench was large and they were on the opposite end. They were clearly on a school trip with no parents nearby. I watched him curse and tell the children to go away. When they cried, he became angrier and asked why they were crying, saying it was annoying. I was shocked and tried to reassure the children that they had done nothing wrong while my ex glared at me. The children ran off and my ex laughed it off as if it were a joke that he had made them cry. Genuinely, it seemed to make his day. After that, I saw nothing but pure evil every time I looked at him. When I broke up with him a couple of days later and cited this as the reason, he only responded with, "Why do you care so much about some random kids?" and tried to argue that it was okay for him to shout at children if their parents were not there to do it. Story 34. My mother. I was abused and controlled throughout my childhood and adolescence, with the abuse continuing into adulthood even after I finally left the family home. The things done to control me are unimaginable to inflict on another person, especially a child, let alone my own child. As a coping mechanism, I downplayed. It's so much in my mind that I still struggle to believe myself when I tell the story. I am 32 now and have recently started therapy. I know I have much to work through and that I need to face the pain rather than resist it to make progress. Feels like it gets worse before it gets better, but I know it will be worth it in time. Story 35. Absolutely. An ex-daughter-in-law. In my 62 years of life and 30 years as a teacher, I can easily say she is the most shockingly horrible person I have ever known, and she continues to be on a weekly basis. Completely evil, trying to destroy other family members and unable to see how she affects her own children. Luckily, she barely gets to see them now and was unable to for a number of years after she lost custody due to her vicious emotional blackmail and nastiness. I cannot think of any woman I have ever met who is so horrifically awful in private and in public. Story 36. Yes, my mother is an actual psychopath. She had my father convinced she loved him while she secretly stole everything from him and left him in absolute ruin. What shocked me was when I realized that she could never truly love anyone and only saw the value of people by how they could best serve her. She is a master manipulator. I realized at 16 that she never loved me and was manipulating me to become like her. I have always treasured my empathy. I am like her in the fact that I can command a room or a small crowd, but I never manipulate. I know what it feels like, and I never want to cause that pain to anyone. It has helped when terrible people have wronged me or when people at my old jobs needed a voice to represent them. I just step up when I can because I love people. Story 37. A Sunday school teacher I had in my teens always gave me the creeps and acted like a really smug, holier-than-thou know-it-all. I always had a bad vibe and avoided him as much as possible. Many years later, it was revealed that he had molested several teenage boys from our congregation and is now a convicted sex offender. Story 38. My aunt and cousin. Between unpaid rent, stolen or missing items, and damage to the house, they owe my dad at least $50,000. When he finally sold the house and they had to leave after 10 years of this, they lied to my grandmother, telling her that they were evicted and accusing my dad of abusing my grandmother and stealing things from him. She, in turn, refused to speak to him for the last 3 years of her life. Also, when my grandmother died this past summer, we unfortunately had to be in the presence of my cousin at the hospital. My grandmother died just after midnight, but we did not leave the hospital until after 2 a.m. My cousin was at my grandmother's house at 8 a.m., clearing, probably stealing, everything she could from the house. I know because I live next door. She also spent time screaming expletives at my sister, accusing her of stealing things from the house. This is just the tip of the iceberg. She also dates men until she can drain them financially and leaves as soon as the money runs out. Story 39. My ex-husband. He derives joy from hurting other people. I would call that evil. He abused me in every possible way for 16 years before I was able to gather enough self-respect to leave him. Story 40. A man was married and often spoke about how great his wife was. He was very vocal about how much he loved her. He was also willing to take in people who hung out in his social group home when they had too much to drink, because he would assault them. Turned out he had been doing things like that since high school. His oldest friends were aware. His family believed it enough to send him to a correctional program in Utah, but they never warned anyone new about his behavior. He was using the appearance of a decent, happily married man as camouflage. Story 41. My best friend's grandmother was the poster child of a psychopath. They did not call her grandmother or by her name. They just called her she or her. She had the aura of Nosferatu. She was vile, abusive, and very treacherous. She was even disowned by her own mother, my best friend's great-grandmother. God knows what happened there. But with the help of an army of lawyers and a few illegal tricks, she still got a hold of her inheritance. There were 3 suicides in the immediate family directly related to her. One of her daughters ran away when she was old enough and never came back. My friend's mother committed suicide with alcohol and pills. Several immediate family members were addicted to various substances. It was a huge mess. My friend's mother would buy him pets from time to time, and they always turned up dead someday. It later came out that his grandmother had taken them out of their cages. Hamster, guinea pig, rabbit, and broke their necks. She hated pets and considered them a waste of money. She was also obsessed with bacteria and germs and hated them for this reason. She would trap people, make them dependent on her, and then use and abuse them at her discretion or force them into unpaid labor. She adopted orphan children from several third world countries because they would be especially vulnerable and have no support network, I assume, and basically treated them as her servants. She would dish out severe and cruel punishments if she was displeased with them. For example, she would drag them into the bathroom and beat them with punches to the face after putting on her extra heavy rings and jewelry. She would beat them like dogs. Another method was locking the children in the trunk of her car and driving around the city, sometimes for hours. My best friend's brother, technically his uncle but our age, committed suicide, and it made the evening news in my city. It was harrowing and devastating to see a good friend of yours jump from the 9th floor. She was rich, and through various schemes and companies she founded, she came close to her self-proclaimed life goal of becoming a billionaire. Money and power were all she cared about. When they were younger, she purposely sent the children out to steal groceries for her so she could save money. When they wanted toys, they had to steal them. On other occasions, she would fill up the shopping cart with groceries worth at least $200 or $300. I was witness to this as I worked there as a cashier at the time and tried to pass by the cash register without paying. When caught, she played the confused old lady. She was 60 to 70 years old at the time. No manager would ever call the police on a poor old lady. Sometimes she succeeded with her theft and then bragged to the children about how good she was at stealing and how much money she saved. She was obsessed with money. After his brother's suicide, my best friend tried to break free. He was living with his girlfriend and a newborn baby in an apartment that belonged to his grandmother. As I said, it was her modus operandi to make people dependent on her and then use and abuse them. So we had to move all his stuff during the day when she was at her office because she would never have allowed that. We mobilized the whole friend group and successfully moved him and his family to the other side of the city. Soon, he received letters begging for forgiveness and trying to convince him to return and make up with her. Then, one day, he received an anonymous letter warning that she was planning revenge on him and trying to trap him again. The letter also stated that she had rented the apartment on the opposite side of the street and had hired a private investigator to observe him around the clock from that apartment. My friend never took up her offer and permanently went his separate way. She got very old, and he would always say things like, "The devil does not want to take his best horse out of the race," or, "She has so many files in hell that nobody wants to work through them." She was truly the perfect example of a narcissistic psychopath. God knows what other evil deeds she committed. She passed away more than 10 years ago. Unfortunately, all of this is true. I even left some things out. I do not think that anyone I know will ever come close to this level of evil. Story 42. My sister, who is both a law degree and a master of business administration, married a man who believes that a husband has the right to force himself on his wife because he thinks the wife becomes the property of her husband upon marriage. He also addresses her as woman instead of using her actual name. He claims to be very patriotic, even though he avoided serving in the Vietnam War, and openly mocks veterans who have post-traumatic stress disorder. They have 3 children, all of whom he is barely cared for because he believes that childcare is women's work. My sister has always been an attractive and well-educated woman, so I cannot understand why she even went on dates with this man. He is the most evil and obnoxious person I have ever personally known. Story 43. Point ad hoc Inc. Placid agonizing heavy enter bear cats beneficial. Story 44. I had a roommate who liked to physically beat people and animals. He had an abuse radar and could walk into a room and pick the person that would let him sexually abuse them, and they kept coming back for more. He was constantly re-victimizing broken women. Story 45. A woman I worked with was on second shift, so there were not many people around. She would slam things all night long just to keep me on edge, make unreasonable requests, get mad when I would not do them, and claim I tried to run her over. She got me suspended 3 times, and I would have been fired if they had not figured out the 3rd time that she was lying. Story 46. I met a 3rd grader and immediately got an off vibe. I kept a close eye on her and asked about her frequently. The classroom teacher said that she was great. She did her work, followed instructions, and had friends. I finally admitted my vibe, but the teacher said she didn't get that from her. I finally let it go, assuming I was wrong, but I wouldn't be here if that were the case. About a week after I gave up, she did it. There was another girl in the same class. She was severely allergic to hand sanitizer. All the kids knew this, so they wouldn't use any on her in the routine of preparing for lunch. She upset the girl somehow. So, she covered her hands with hand sanitizer and rubbed it all over the allergic girl's arms. An ambulance was called. The allergic girl was okay. She did not return to school. The girl received minor discipline, and the classroom teacher came up to me and told me I was right. We kept an eye on her for the rest of the year, but nothing else as dramatic happened. Story 47. My ex and I, when we were together, moved to Central America when our son was a baby. A year later, we split, and he met a young girl from the Czech Republic. They kidnapped my son from the babysitter's house while I was grocery shopping and refused to allow me contact. He locked me out of our bank accounts, canceled all my subscriptions and health insurance. While I was out trying to get a lawyer or someone to help me in a foreign language as an immigrant, my house was robbed. They took everything, including my son's toys, diapers, and books, which had no value, making me think it was personal. They took the time to replace the items they stole with lumber and trash, positioned to look like my belongings so I wouldn't notice right away, which tells me it was the person helping me move in, an employee of my ex. I spent the next 7.5 years fighting to stay alive and figure out how to pay lawyers. I am now on my 9th lawyer. The first 8 were all paid off to stall my case. The judge at the local courthouse and the family services social workers were paid off. My brakes have been cut dozens of times, my radiators punctured with needles, and my tires deflated when I was far from an air pump. It is a rugged and mountainous area, and a car malfunction can easily be fatal. I am still waiting for the Superior Court to finish its process. They recently declared me a suitable mother. They found that my son's assertion that he does not want contact with me is due to the negative influence of his father and that woman, whom my son calls mom. Mention of me in the house is forbidden. Gifts from me are forbidden. The handful of times I have bumped into them at the beach, they have spirited him away and then tried to file a restraining order against me for being at the same beach they decided to go to. I missed my son's childhood, and my relationship with my 2 adult daughters is damaged because they needed me in the States all this time. I am now nearly incapacitated with post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. I cried so much for so long that both my tear ducts got terribly infected. It took me over 2 years to clear it up because I had to train myself to stop crying, despite the constant waves of grief that never give me a break. In the first few years of my son being missing, when I happened to see him somewhere in our very small town, I spotted bruises consistent with abuse. The most painful thing has been knowing that my baby is being beaten and psychologically tortured by being separated from his mother and never being allowed to talk about it. But I have not been able to protect him. It is unbearable. My ex and that woman have since had 2 children together. She is a mother, and she did and continues to do this to another mother. My ex, who begged me for 5 years to give him a child, is allowing it. They are evil incarnate. Story 48. I went to a sleepover with my cousin at our uncle's house when I was 5 and she was 7. I woke up in the middle of the night to a man putting his hand down my pants. I started crying and went upstairs to sleep in my aunt and uncle's room. The next morning, the same man exposed himself and was playing with my cousin, throwing her up and down on him. The man was my uncle's wife's son from a previous marriage. He was 27 at the time. He is now serving a life sentence in prison for raping a 5-year-old child and recording it, among other charges involving preschool-aged girls. Story 49. Yes. All of the men who sexually abused and harassed women at the Amazon building where I worked, I would consider them evil. These men took advantage of the fact that during a pandemic and under harsh economic conditions, many women were forced into working situations they might not have otherwise accepted. They then used the excuse that it was a male-dominated work environment as a reason for Amazon to ignore sexual harassment and abuse. Do not even get me started on the racial components and complexities of the inequities there. I would also say that the people who facilitated the abuse, including human resources and leadership, are evil too. Cutting women off from earning a living because they refuse to be sexual with men who deny them their autonomy is something women have fought against for decades in this country. And men at Amazon are fighting to turn that back. Story 50. My cousin saved me in my sleep, and I was punished by my grandmother for not removing him from me. Story 51. Not me but my dad. A long while ago, there was an infamous case in a small city nearby where a 12-year-old girl murdered her parents and brother and then ran off to be with her 21-year-old boyfriend. As I live in the nearest major city, she was dealt with through our local system. My dad, who worked in the system, sat in on her parole hearing a few years later. He said he had never experienced anything like that. Unfortunately, due to the way the system works, she was released at 18. Due to publication bans, there is no way to know where she is now. Story 52. I think my sister is. We don't talk. She is a narcissistic manipulator, the same as my mother. The last time I talked to her, she called me laughing and telling a story. A boyfriend had broken up with her. To get back at him, she called his place of employment and told management she was his girlfriend and that he drinks and smokes marijuana before work, which was not true. The young man lost his job. When I told her this was not funny at all and was horrible, she seemed genuinely perplexed and started yelling at me. Story 53. My mom's close friend dated a serial killer. He was an over-the-road trucker and targeted prostitutes. It took multiple state agencies and the Federal Bureau of Investigation to catch him, but having met the man, you would never have known. Story 54. A kid I went to school with, whom I will call Philip. I am someone who gives people the benefit of the doubt, but Philip was beyond any justification. He was always angry for no reason and would lash out at classmates over inconsequential things. In first grade, he reduced a girl to tears because she crinkled her wrapper while eating her Valentine's candy. Everyone dreaded seating assignment changes because no one wanted to be in the blast zone. He needed a paraprofessional with him at all times, not for his sake, but for the rest of us. I was lucky in that the worst he did to me was pull my pigtails and call me a terrorist because I was Muslim. In second grade, he pushed another kid off the jungle gym and broke the kid's ankle. He then threw a tantrum because he was getting in trouble for that. That same year, he would go into people's lockers and steal their winter clothes because he did not have his own and could not go to recess without them. He did not have any friends because his idea of friendship was cruel pranks, like scribbling all over a kid's art project or trying to stab the same kid's dog with a pen. Philip moved to a different elementary school in third grade, so I only heard the rest through the grapevine. He got drunk underage and stole a neighbor's tractor. He sexually harassed people starting in middle school, like slapping girls' butts in gym class and making inappropriate advances at female teachers. He was removed from a high school pottery class after a tantrum that led to the destruction of multiple people's projects. He cornered someone in the bathroom with a Swiss Army knife to try to steal their vape pen. His social media was full of Make America Great Again content and gave off the vibes of a mass shooter. Philip dropped out of high school the moment he legally could. The last I heard, he was serving prison time in another state for attempting to rape and murder his girlfriend. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.